I told Jessica that I told Jessica, my name is Dr. Michael Ward, that I would introduce myself. But before I do that, I'm gonna start with a little perspective, and today end with a little perspective. I'm going through some old cases. I came across something from years ago. This man was walking downtown on his way home from work to his car, and he was accosted by a very dirty, shabby-looking homeless man who demanded a couple bucks so he could have dinner. And so the man looks at the guy, not so sure, but he decides, he pulls out a couple bucks and he says, "Now, if I give this to you, are you going to buy liquor?" And the guy says, "No, I gave up drinking years ago." He says, "All right, are you going to use it to gamble?" And he says, "No way." He says, "I need everything I can get just to survive." And so then he says, "Okay, are you going to use this to pay the green fees to play golf?" And the guy looks at him and says, "Are you nuts? I haven't golfed in over 20 years. And then the man says to the homeless guy, he says, "You know what? I'm not going to give you any money. Instead, I'm going to take you home for a terrific dinner cooked by my wife." And the homeless man was astounded and said, "But won't she be furious with you if you take me to your home? Look how dirty I am. And I know I smell terrible." And he looks at the guy and he says, "Hey man, that's okay. I just want my wife to see what a man looks like when he's given up drinking, gambling, and so, with that in mind, I got my PhD in 1971 from a place called Peabody College, which is part of Vanderbilt University. I came out here and did an internship at a hospital for what was then called the mentally retarded in Pomona, and a postdoc at County USC. I worked at County. I got my license in California in 1975. I worked at County Hospital, which was the general, the county, back then. That was the place. All the police cases, everything came to County General. And I worked there for 28 years. And then I worked 6 years at Twin Towers for the Department of Mental Health. The other aspects of my career, two things I will mention, is while I spent about 12 years I did almost all the regional center evaluations in the county jail for both men and women for about 12 years. And I've also, in addition to working for the county, I've been in the delinquency and dependency court system for almost 40 years. Done about 2,000 delinquency cases and about 3,000 dependency court cases, which means I've seen about 10,000 people in dependency court. The average case is 1 or 2 kids, 1 or 2 parents, etc. The other thing, to my credit or not, is I am a co-author with a good friend and colleague, Mike Maloney, of 2 books of some relevance. One in 1976 on psychological assessment, and the other in 1979 on mental retardation. They're both with Oxford University Press. That's about the extent of what I do. I'm kind of retired now, and so Jessica told me to feel free to say my piece, and that's what I want to do. Unfortunately, initially when Jessica contacted me, I was under the impression this is for all new attorneys. And I see many of you who have been around as long as I have. And so I don't know what I'm going to have to tell you, some of you people. Hopefully some of you will give something else. Let me say a little bit about the 730 panel. Historically, many people don't realize this, but clinical psychology didn't even exist until 1950. And really in the 50s where they started the first clinical program. And forensic psychology did not exist until the mid-70s. I never went through a forensic program, didn't have one. Now they do have forensic programs. So this is a new field, but relatively new. But now clinical and forensic psychology are quite prominent. In terms of the panel, before the 1970s, people got on these panels just by judges, or a presiding judge or chairman of the panel would just say to somebody, "Yeah, you can come on the panel." Now, for the adult panel, the delinquency panel, and this panel, we interview people. So they have to submit an application, and we interview to see, has this person got something that we can use, in this court, and do they seem competent, etc. So now it's a much more formal process. Just so you know, to get an idea, in 1996 there were 85 people on this panel in the children's court. In 2011 it was down to 56, 2014 50, and 2000 last year were 45 people on the panel. And it's 30 PhDs and 15 MDs. And at least half of the MDs they're not psychiatrists. They're burn specialists, orthopods for fractures, etc. So that's the makeup of the panel. The one thing the selection committee does here, in addition to selecting people, is we deselect them. So when you complain about somebody or a judge says, this was terrible, we look at it and we have kicked several people off the panel. And they deserved it. So we do kind of monitor it. All right, what do you need to get on these panels? As I said in the outline there, 5 years post-MD or PhD. We want people who have some experience, who have been around a couple blocks before we get them on the panel. Then obviously you have to have a certain skill or expertise that this court needs. Like, for example, speaking Spanish. We need people who can speak Spanish. Okay, so we look at things like that, and of course certain expertise. Then there's the whole issue of accessibility and availability for cases. There's a number of people on the panel. For example, in 2016, of the 45 people on the panel, 24 people made $0. They were never appointed. 24. Half. So a lot of people are being used, and a lot of people are not being used. Turnaround time for reports critical. Obviously, people want things in a timely manner. Now I have down here Judge Marcus Tucker's observation. Judge Tucker, unfortunately, has passed away. He's a great guy. He's an African-American man who just was a fantastic judge. And he made an observation. He was chairman of this selection committee panel here at Children's Court many years ago. And he told us, we're all sitting there at the panel, and the panel, by the way, consists of mostly lawyers, a lot of Ladle people, county council, Children's Law Center. I'm the only psychologist on the panel now, and I'm actually the original psychologist when Judge Boland started it, and the only original member left. And then there's a hearing officer who chairs the committee. And so Judge Tucker one day said to us, look, when I look out over my bench, all I basically see are brown and black faces. And yet all you 730 guys are white. He says, something's wrong. And that was a very good observation. And he says, we've got to get a more diverse panel. And there is, we all talk about being culturally sensitive, racially, ethnically sensitive, etc. But really, when you're talking about talking to little kids or teenagers, people like to talk to people that look somewhat like them. And you have to have a panel that reflects the diversity of the community. So he made a real attempt to expand the panel. The problem with that is there were relatively few brown, black, 730 people who wanted to work on these panels because there weren't many of them, and other entities, firms, gobbled them up, paid them a lot of money, and they went elsewhere. So we had a hard time getting people on this panel because they had so many other offers. So, but that's something that needs to be thought of in terms of what's going on. Now, last thing on the first page there, what you need in any 730 evaluator: competence, fairness, or being unbiased, and skepticism. Obviously you want somebody who's competent, I don't have to tell you that. But it's critical to have somebody who's unbiased and fair, particularly in things like bonding studies, for example. If I say, when that mother walked in, the kid lit up, you have to believe that that happened and that I'm telling the truth. Or that the kid was kind of hesitant, seemed a little anxious or scared. You have to trust that I'm accurately relaying what I observed. It's critical, like in a bonding case. It's critical in all these cases to be fair and unbiased. But in that kind of situation, it's really important because I'm making observations about how people relate or how they seem to get along. Now, skepticism. You cannot be a 730, you shouldn't even be in forensics at all if you aren't a skeptic. You have to be a skeptic because forensics involves the law, and people either want to get something or get out of something. And they have angles, and they'll use it. And you have to be aware of that. For example, one day when I was doing my regional center evaluations in the jail, I saw a guy, I was told another psychologist had seen him and said he had an IQ of 39. And so because of that, it was for the lawyer, he did it for the lawyer. Because of that, they said, well, let's get him in the regional center. So I got called to see him. As soon as I talked to the guy, I knew he was phony as hell. No way this guy is mentally retarded. And by the way, I use the word mentally retarded because the book was called, before the old days, Mental Retardation in Modern Society. And I try to update it, but a lot of my reports have those words in it. It wouldn't be true anymore. But anyway, I said, this guy's not. He's a total phony. And so I was in the jail, and the lawyer happened to hear somebody say, Dr. Ward, and the lawyer came up to me, his lawyer, and said, are you the one who evaluated him for the regional center? And I says, yeah. And she says, well, why didn't you get him in? I said, he's a phony. I says, he just gives nonsense answers. Like, let me give you an example in the old test. What are the colors? One of the first questions on an IQ test, you're going to say, what's that doing on an IQ test? But here's the question. What are the colors of the American flag? Now, you may think that's ridiculous to be on an IQ test. If you live in this culture, now I'm not talking about people who got off the boat, it's a little different, okay? But if you live in this culture, you know the colors of the American flag. They make you pledge allegiance to it. They sing it at the Super Bowl, all sporting events. And if you have any observational skills, you will know it's red, white, and blue. This guy's response to that question was orange, purple, and yellow. There is not a genuinely mentally retarded person in the world who would say that. He's a jerk, phony, total phony. And so she says, but the judge already found him incompetent because of that IQ 39. And I said, the only incompetence in this case is the psychologist who tested him. Because that guy is a total phony. And if he ever had talked to somebody with an IQ of 39, and I have, you know they don't talk like this guy. People at that level, you're at the moderate, profound to moderate, severe to moderate range of developmental disability. People at that level, they don't use the kind of words we use. They have articulation problems. They have motor problems. They're different. And it was obvious to me. And so I'm just saying, you got to be skeptical. Now, all right, that's the end of the first page. I'm going to rush through because I do have some test things I want to show you. How do we figure out, how do we figure out if you're competent, fair, and if you're appropriately skeptical? There's an informal book on all of us who have been in this system a long time. I know, I think the book on me probably is that I'm pro-parent. A little pro-parent, and that's why I'm sure I'm here talking to you and not to county council. Okay? I don't think I am pro-parent in a biased sense. However, I do have to admit that I believe in psychology and child development. And I also believe that the law is right, that kids should be with their parents unless they absolutely can't or shouldn't be. And so I don't think it's bias to try to keep families together. But I can see why the book on me maybe is a little bit pro-parent. I think they felt I was basically fair, but I'm sure there are judges and county council who would never use it. And there are others who did. So, but you have to be aware, people get to know you. The conundrum on new and unknown evaluators. This is the real problem in the panel. We have struggled with it every year. How do you get new people to do 730s? When your parent or your child is on this case, you don't want to take a chance with somebody that's unknown. And so people just don't want to use them. And how are they ever going to get known if people won't use them? And yet I understand from a legal point of view why you don't want to take a chance with somebody who isn't good or who knows what they're going to do. At least they kind of know what that Dr. Ward does. He goes, yeah, I can live with them. By the way, along that line, multiple judges have told me the best way for them to resolve a case is just to get the lawyers to agree on a 730 evaluator. If I can get them to agree on that, half of my job's done. And so you get people, obviously, to know, and people have to bargain, and that's what happens. That's how it works. Now, I have to say here, ability to write a clear, concise, concise, mea culpa, readable and useful report. The other book on me is that I write books instead of reports. I am incredibly neurotic, to use an old-fashioned word. And I just had a hard time. Judge Bolin, one day, I walked into court many years ago with a 730, and he was in the middle of a court case, but it wasn't serious or a trial. He just stopped. And Judge Bolin said, "Oh, look, Dr. Ward, I see a whole stand of trees fall in the Sierra." I mean, that was the truth. And the problem with me is, one of the cases I have here today is that the report is 86 pages long. And what it was a crossover family law case, and I felt I have to include, and there was 2 previous family law evaluations, so I put material from them, all the DCF stuff, and then I used to use extensive quotes from parents and children in my reports. Now, I'm the first to admit, don't do as I say, do as I do, or however you want to see it. The truth is, I had a need to do that. It was neurotic. Most people don't have that problem. But at least it was all there. And for over 3,000 cases, I have to say, I've testified relatively few times here. Probably maybe only 75 to 100 times in dependency court. And I think it's because I said enough. And people, they knew where I was coming from. Anyway, that's the end of that. Now, why do you need or want a 730 eval? Well, that's really up to you and the court. It's not for me to tell you what you need. You need 730s, I think, for all kinds of cases. Obviously, if it's an issue of low intelligence, you need a 730 if that's really going to be an issue. If it's mental illness, you need a 730. But all the kinds of things you people deal with all the time, all the concerns about, can this person benefit from reunification services? Are they going to, what about substance abuse? Are they ever going to get treated? Are they ever going to be able to stay away? What about violence, domestic violence, propensity towards violence? A lot of those issues do need a 730. And I think it could be helpful or useful. And there's one other place I think you should consider a 730. When you have a really horrible, difficult client, it's better for you to have me call them a jerk than for you to try to deal with them. And so sometimes it's a way to say, well, I tried. I didn't know that guy was going to write that lousy report about you. Sometimes you need that as a way to push the case along. So you ought to consider that. Now, when do you want a psychiatrist or psychologist? I am not an anti-psychiatry guy. We get along with psychiatrists, they get along with us. Those days, the old days of war are over. In point of fact, more psychologists are doing forensic work than psychiatrists. And that's also an economic thing, because psychiatrists, there's fewer of them, and they make much more money. And they don't, let's be honest, the 730 pay scale is, nobody's getting rich on that. You may have a decent life if you do enough of them, but you're not getting rich. And so there's a problem there. But when do you need a psychiatrist or a psychologist? Here's what I want to say about that. Obviously, if it's a specific question about medication, of course you need a psychiatrist. But if the question is, is this person mentally ill, and could they benefit from medication? A psychologist can do that too. You don't have to have a psychiatrist to do that. They can't tell you what medicine, but they can tell you this person is very ill and needs some kind of medication. But the other thing is, I have down here from credo to credence. Credo is Latin for I believe. Credence is, it is believable. Back at County Hospital, we used to have our graduate students, Department 95 was at the County Hospital. Bottom floor of County Hospital, part of it was Department 95, where they did all the mental health cases, conservatorships, etc. And they had, and I'm not picking on them, but they had a psychiatrist testifying, because in those days, the psychiatrists were the only ones on these panels. And it was a case, and the psychiatrist said, this person is schizophrenic. And the judge says, well, how do you know this person is schizophrenic? And the guy said, well, because I've seen thousands of them. And so I said to my students later, of course, appropriately, and he was probably wrong thousands of times too. Because he's getting up there saying, I'm the expert. You have to believe. I believe he's schizophrenic. You have to believe me. And what we emphasized in our book, when we wrote the assessment book in '76, is no, you got to go from I believe to it is believable. It's no good. Who cares what I think? What do you care what I think if somebody is mentally ill or not? You want to know, are they mentally ill? Can you show me how and why they're mentally ill? And this is the one area where I have to say there is a potential advantage of a psychologist over a psychiatrist, and it's because of psych testing. So you have another data point. In addition to an interview, history data, you also have test data. And if all those data points say, this guy's got a problem, you have a pretty good case. And so the one advantage I think that psychologists do have over psychiatrists is they can provide some very useful test data. So that's something you should keep in mind. Now, the other thing though is, having said that, beware of psychologists carrying test kit. Because psychologists go around with their little test kit and they give their test. And then just like the idiot who got the IQ 39, they use that score and say, oh, he's retarded. Whereas if he knew what a mentally retarded person actually looked like and talked like, he'd know this is nonsense. So, like, one of the areas this really matters is neuropsychology. We have a lot of neuropsychologists now. They give all these batteries and they give all these tests. This is organic, this is normal, etc. But it's a test-controlled approach, and it's too much. So the testing is helpful, but if people are over-relying on test scores, and this was a little bit higher than that, they don't know what they're doing. They don't have a good sense of it. You have to have some experience with these things. Okay, now, with the next thing is the basic elements of any 730 report. I'm going to say very little here. This you've seen and you know. Obviously, the reason for referral, who did I see, how long did I see. There are some people who evaluators don't put down how much time they spent with people. I've always put exactly, I saw them from 9:35 to what. And sometimes people, they only see somebody for 20 minutes, so of course they don't want to put down they saw them for only 20 minutes. You need to ask about that stuff. So if that information isn't there, when did they see? Obviously you need to know what did I review? Who did I talk to? Who talked to me? How many did I talk to other attorneys, etc. Who tried to find out what's going on in the case? That stuff has to be upfront and in your report. And then we have, obviously in any case, this is the part I had trouble with, a case synopsis. You could just say, here's what DCFS says, here's the issue, and here's what we're going to do about it. Then the evaluation procedures and data sources, I'll show you some examples of that. Just list out what you did, the kinds of interview, historical stuff, and test data. Then observations and results. The observations are clinical. Any report has to say, when I saw this person, he was friendly, he was logical, coherent, or he was very depressed, or he was angry. I have to have those clinical observations down in the report. Then the results themselves, the actual test data, there has to be a little technical discussion of the data. Like on a MMPI, I'll show you an example of that, MMPIs. If I don't explain a little bit about the MMPI in a report, another psychologist reviewing it wouldn't be able to comment on what I did or whether I was off base. Whereas if I give a basic, and in all of my reports I always have a boilerplate thing explaining the MMPI, one paragraph, and then I'd go through and show this is what this person had. So any other person could say, I see, they could actually make out the form if they had it. And they would know why I'm saying this guy's schizophrenic or this guy is a malingerer. And then dispositional considerations and recommendations. Obviously that's the end point of the process, and that's tough. And it's tough to say how to do it because it all depends on the case, but I'm going to give you some examples of that. Okay, what should attorneys tell their clients about 730s? First of all, you need to know that most good 730 evaluators ask something like this in the beginning. Why do you think you're here? Why am I seeing you today? And what did your attorney tell you about this? We ask about that. So you need to know that questions like that come up. The other thing is, what do you tell them? How do you prepare them? A lot of people aren't prepared. And I do think that the best advice is to be fairly open and honest. I realize, you don't want to overdo it, but, be open and honest. It's probably the best advice. And what do we tell your clients about the 730? Well, one of the things I tell, because a lot of people think I work for DCFS, I tell them I don't work for DCFS. I'm appointed by the court because people wonder, whose side am I on? Of course, in this kind of a setting, I understand that. And then, what should we tell children? Now, this is a tough one. What do you tell children about 730? For little kids, the less you tell them, the better. Definitely. Just say, oh, we're going to see a man or a woman, and I'll be a nice person. They'll talk to you and maybe play something with you, etc. As they get a little older, you may have to be more upfront with them, because they're going to know something's up, and they want to know, are their parents or somebody going to find out what they tell me? And that stuff has to be explained to them. That might happen, or it might not, or I can't tell you. I promise you it won't. They need to know that. You got to be upfront with kids as they get older. Should parents and clients be given copies of the 730? This is a tough question. I would say, I've done so many crossover family law cases for this court. I felt I was in family law for years because it was all coming from family law. When they couldn't get what they wanted there, they alleged abuse or neglect. And so it got here into the system, and until it was resolved, then it finally went back to family law. But we ended up doing the family law evaluations. Those should never be given to people, because I'm telling you, one parent down the road will take that report in another situation, in another setting, and say, hey, 2 years ago, my ex-wife was evaluated, and look what a horrible person she is. That is definitely going to happen. They should not be given these reports. Now, are there occasions when maybe a portion of it, maybe they should have it? I would have to say yes. There are occasions when they should, yes.
Dr. Ward, this is something we've gone around for many years, but for us, as parents' counsel, we are given a copy of the 730. It is in our file. That file belongs to the client. The client will get the 730. We've had judges, and there's a lot of thought around this, but the truth is, that client, that's their file. If they want to hire private counsel, there's going to be substitution of counsel, that other counsel gets it. The client has, at any time, the client, that's their file.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that if it's an evaluation of one person. But when I see the kids, parents, and the grandparents, and they all tell me their side of the story, that should not be waved around. Because, you have to do what you have to do legally, but it puts people in jeopardy. And so I think those kinds of reports need to be looked at differently. Anyway, I accept what you're saying, and it's a tough thing. Okay, what are some, let me say this, what are some parents or clients, what have they told me about 730? Now, I have to tell you this, In 3,000 cases, this has only happened maybe 50 times. So it's not like this was told to me a lot. But I was surprised at how many people said to me, and maybe it's because I'm neurotic, and the only reason I could write all these long reports is I listened to them for a long time. And I had many, 50 people, maybe in over 35 years, it's not much, say, you're the first person who's heard me out. They got to say their whole story. And they thanked me for it. They said, even if you end up not doing it, I appreciate you letting me tell the story. And so there is a value to that, and just being heard out. All right, now, I'm going to try to now give you some ideas of what psychologists do and don't do. This is a drawing. This is a... she's 4 years, 9 months old, average IQ, had an 88 on a picture vocabulary test. And this is her drawing. If you know anything about kids, you know how kids draw? They draw a circle. That's the head. They put 1 or 2 eyes. I'm talking about like 3-year-olds now. A nose, maybe, and a mouth, maybe not. They might put ears. They might put a little hair. And then what do? They stick the arms and the legs right from the little ball. There's no torso. They don't do that. What they focus on is what they see. And that's what they see, the face. And that's where it all hangs out. So this is very normal for a kid, okay? Now, this is a 6-year-old girl, IQ of 101. 6 years old, she's actually got some artistic quality in addition. The value of these drawing tests, it's not, you know, in the old days the dynamicists would go around, oh well, the head is kind of big, so they're probably very, you know, egocentric, and they think they're real smart, etc. We don't even look at this stuff that way. We look at this as a developmental task. This tells us, it's a good indication of where a person is at in their overall functioning. Now, there's a reason I'm showing you this. These two, all right, one last, again, average IQ, and a 10-year-old kid, IQ of 100. And that's his drawing, and he said it was an old man and an old woman. The other 2 pictures, both of them, I didn't see it there. Both the kids, I says, well, who is this? I always ask them that, who is this? And they'd say, that's me. All right, now, this is a 32-year-old man. Many years ago, a regional center person in this court because he wanted his kid. He wanted to be reunited with his kid, or have his kid. Actually, the child was taken from the hospital. This is his draw a person, 32 years old. His IQ is 53. That's how he draws. Now, there is a little indication of a torso down here, kind of. But it's so close to what a little kid does, it tells you a lot. I can sit there in court and say, he's got an IQ of 53. The judge doesn't know what that means. I can show that picture, the judge gets it. This guy's got problems. We got to take care of him or make some other issues. All right, now, I'm going to put this up. This is a test called the Bender. It's called the Bender Visual Motor Gestalt Test. It's a screening test. It was one of the early neuropsych tests. These are the designs. By 10 years old, a kid, a normal 10-year-old, can basically draw these designs. So, and that'll tell you where they're at, okay? So, that's what they're supposed to look like. This same guy I just showed you, his drawing, the IQ, 32-year-old guy with an IQ of 53, here's how he drew those. Totally. Now here's the point. This test, it's called a visual motor. You can't tell from this test, is the problem that he sees this, does he see it differently than we see it? Or is the problem he sees it like we see it, but it's a motor problem, he can't draw it? Or is it both? Does he have visual deficits and motor deficits? So you can't tell from this what it is. But what you can tell, if this is how he sees or does his physical world, what's he doing with the social emotional world? How is he putting that together? What's he doing in terms of what a kid needs? So this gives you an idea of what is going on. Okay, now, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you this case a little bit. This is evaluation procedures and data sources. So this is a case I'm going to show you. It's not very good. Anyway, we gave the Wechsler, yeah. So we gave the standard IQ test. Thank you. And his IQ is, you can see, verbal IQ 59, performance 57, full scale or total 54. The subtests are all there. A scale score of 5 would be close to the high, mild, retarded range. All these are lower. The quick test of intelligence is a picture vocabulary test. You say a word and they have to point to the picture that fits it. Gives another index of intelligence. Achievement test. You can see his reading, spelling, and arithmetic. Where is it? He's all at the first, second, or third grade level. And first I'll show you this is his draw person. This guy is, oops. Okay, you can hardly see it. What he says is, it says son. He wrote above it. These are his drawings. They're better, obviously, than the others. But he said son, mom, and dad. And this is a case where he wanted his kid. I'll talk about that in a second. And then here's what his Bender, that same test, here's what he did on that. It's hard to see. I really apologize. But it's very impaired compared to what it should be. So let me talk a little bit about that and what I did in terms of the case. His name is John. He's 31 years old. He was born and raised in LA. And his son, John Jr., was 6 months old at the time that I saw him. I didn't see the child, I just saw him. He's African American. The mother is a 35-year-old woman. She's Caucasian. Both the mother and father were clients of the regional center. This is the father's only child, but the 6th one for the mom. All of her first 5 children are in foster care. Child was taken into protective custody at the hospital and has been in foster care since. And he wants his son. Court ordered no reunification for the mom, but will consider the father. They wanted to know, can he benefit from services? John had a prior diagnosis of mild MR, mild mental retardation, so somewhere in the 55 to 70 range, and that's about where he is. But he was at the lower end of it. And the other diagnosis was intermittent explosive disorder. He did have multiple instances in the past where he blew up, got a little violent, never killed anybody or anything like that, but allegedly had a knife and tried to stab some people. He, of course, disputes that. I don't know. Used to be a gangbanger. He says, I was a blood, but I don't do that anymore. And they say people at DCFS said they were describing him as extremely violent and dangerous. Now, he's currently separated from his wife of 1 year, so he had a wife before, who was also a regional center client. There were allegations he strangled her again. He denies he did that. Both these people now, in the recent past, have been very cooperative with DCFS and the regional center. So they were taking services. He was not having episodes of violence. People were saying he's dramatically different than he was a couple of years ago. So a lot of people were arguing maybe we should give him a chance. But he does have a history of that, of acting out. He has no serious substance abuse history. I mean, he dabbled in it, alcohol a bit, and then marijuana, and a little crack at times, etc. But nothing real serious. Now, let me just give you okay, here's, I want to just read something here to give a little flavor of what's going on with John. Okay, it was, at the time, it was concluded by the DCFS reports that the mother could not protect the minors from her live-in companion, John Brown, who was described as having numerous mental problems. and being developmentally delayed, unspecified mental illness, not taking medication. In point of fact, he started to take medication. He took some Thorazine, didn't like it, but it did help settle him down, and it did help him take care of these explosive episodes. Now, the issue here is he was tearful when he cried about his childhood. He never knew his real father. He was beaten by his mother. This is what he reports, quite severely. And he was also sexually abused. Now, so how do I put this all together? They want to know, can this guy have this kid? He's 6 months old. He's in foster care, and he wants his child. And he says, I want to just read a flavor of him. It was interesting talking to him. Let me just see here. He says, my son is 5 months old. He's learning a lot of things. We visit him every 2 weeks. Have you learned anything from your parenting classes? He laughed. What you want to know, I take anger management on Friday and Saturday, 2 to 3 hours, and me and his girlfriend do it together. We've been doing that for a while. The first lady, I didn't like her, but this class we got a man. He's cool. He makes me laugh. I never felt better. Everywhere I go, I hug him. I run up to a car and say, hi, how you doing? I wave to police officers and everybody. Ever since anger management, me and the girlfriend have a good relationship. So he really wants his son, and he's really pushing for it. But he said to me, I evaluated him, and one other person evaluated him at the same time, and he said, the other worker asked, what would you do if John started crying at 2 in the morning? Would you be mad? I said, no. I'd go to him and check and see if he's wet and change his diaper. He's learning from parenting class. If he needs to be fed, I'd feed him. If he needs a lullaby, I'll sing to him because I'm a good singer. I sang at Disneyland, a competition thing. What else would you look for in that situation? See if he's sick. Look for sniffles, rash, constipation, or diarrhea. If he has constipation or diarrhea or sniffles, I won't take no chances. I'll rush him to the hospital. That's how people lose their kids. So there's some insight there. But is it enough? Is it enough to allow him to have the full independent care and custody of the child, of a baby, 5 to 6 month old infant? And how do you make that decision? Now, I didn't see his girlfriend. They're together, but I didn't evaluate her. And I said, that's a whole other issue. The court's already said no reunification for her. So how is this going to work out? But he wants this kid in his home. So all I'll say is this. I'm not going to read it to you. It's a tough call to make. But what I said is, let me just try to... I said, in short and in reference to the major issue I'm being asked to address, namely whether this man can have reunification services, meaning whether he can independently raise his child, I would have to say that I do not believe that he has the capacity to do so in a fully independent manner. In fact, if he were to be given custody of a child, it could only be with considerable assistance and supervision of some outside agency and or persons. To the degree a situation like that can be arranged, wherein such assistance and supervision is provided, then perhaps he could be reunified with his child, although that really is not tantamount to having full independent care and custody. Okay? So, I'm not, you know, the other thing I forgot to mention, all these cases I do, we never get feedback. Almost never. I'll bet in 3,000 cases I got feedback on less than 100. What happens to these people? And part of it is when my 730 comes in, the case is still going on for months before the court finally makes the decision. And so at that point, who even thinks about the 730? And so, but you just don't get to find out what happened. I don't really know what happened in that case. Now, I want to do something else now. This is the MMPI. I want to give you, now, it's so light. There's the important thing about the MMPI. A lot of people look at the scales. You know, we talked about the test 1, 2, the different scales at the top, you know, depression, schizophrenia, paranoia, etc. But the real things we look at are the validity scale configurations. On the MMPI, these are the scales that we look at, whether you're paranoid, schizophrenic, depressed, psychopath, hypomanic, etc. These are called the validity scales, and what they tell you is how the person took the test. How they took the test. Did they approach the test in an open fashion, or were they defensive as hell? This is much more important to me than all this stuff. People can argue about whether he's schizophrenic on here or what. I don't really care about that. I mean, it's not that I don't care. It's not nearly as important as whether he's BSing me or whether he's telling the truth. That's what you need to know. And so this is the profile. This is a workers' comp profile. The high F is, woe is me, you name the problem, I got it. Okay? This is dependency court and family law. This is called the lie scale. These are the two defensive scales. This scale, like the lie scale, it says, you know, once in a while I get angry. Oh no, I've never been angry in my life. Once in a while I feel like swearing. Oh, I would never do that. I've never felt that way. When you got a person doing this, they're not telling you what's going on. If you've got a person doing this, they're trying to get out of something. They're faking it. Okay? So this is very important in these cases. Now, I got to make sure we keep time here. Wow, already 1 o'clock. Okay, you know what? I'm going to have to fast forward here. I had a couple cases to show you on that, but I'm going to show you one other case. This was a case I did. I'm not going to give a lot of specifics here, but it was the 86-page report. And let me just tell you what it is, and then I'll show you one piece of data and try to end this. The dad is 56, the mom is 43. The order from the court was to see just the parents, not the child. The child was 7 years old. And the court did not want me to see her because the child's therapist said she didn't want the child to have to talk to me. She feels too much going on. I reviewed the previous evaluation, and the previous evaluator gave them an MMPI, an MCMI, another personality test. Both of these people are very bright, very accomplished, all had bachelor's and master's degrees, successful in business. The father, the 56-year-old father, did have, he's never been in a psych hospital, but he has been treated for bipolar disorder for about 8 years and taking the medication faithfully. The mother, this couple, by the way, never lived together. He was never married. He does have he had one other child who was 14 at the time, a daughter, who lives with her mom and stays with him. And then the mother was married for 7 years, had 2 girls who at that time were 16 and 19. And she had a major family law problem when that divorce happened. And the father of those 2 girls, although he sees them a lot, she has never allowed those girls to spend a night in his house. Never. So she has certain views and feelings. Now, the sustained petition in this case, this is what the court said. This was before I saw them. And this was the sustained petition, it's real short. And it says, the mother and father have been involved in a highly contested family law dispute involving custody and visitation, which has included physical and sexual abuse allegations being made by the child against the father. Such dispute has adversely affected the child in that she suffered serious physical and emotional harm, and mother and father have failed to protect the child from the effects of the highly contested dispute. So basically, they're saying it's a family law problem. This is the, hard to see these transparencies, here it is. Because they had taken the other test, I gave them what's called the PAI, Personality Assessment Inventory. And, all right, whoops. Now, all I'm going to say, again, these are all the clinical scales. This is not an elevated profile. This means, these are the validity scales, like the MMPI. This means they're somewhat defensive. That's the father's. This is the mother's. Okay. No, I'm sorry, the other one. The first one was the mother's. She had the higher defensive scale. He had a lower one. So that's the only test data I had on him. So then what happens is, I do my evaluation, and I see him. The father is adamant. He's never touched this child, never done anything to her. The allegations are hard to, the court itself didn't find him. The mother was furious that the court didn't look at the stuff they should look at, said, I know he has molested her and will do it again. He had not seen his child for a year and a half when I saw them. She would not allow it. She would get just so histrionic. The child would get all wrapped up. The child didn't want to see her father, etc. But all reports are, before this happened, she had a very good relationship with her father. But she says, no, I don't want to see him now. And the mother would never bring her for visits or anything. So anyway, I basically said in my report, oh, and the other thing is, I've done 3,000 cases. I never had a secretary. I made all my own appointments for all those cases. This mother was the most difficult person, I put that right in my report, I've ever had to work with just to get her in. She was impossible. She had rigid things about, no, I can only come on Thursday from 2 to 4. You know, and as long as it's not raining, etc. Anyway, there was no way. There was no way she was going to cooperate. So I wrote a report in which I said that that this was impossible, that she was just definitely influencing this kid. And as I've said in many cases, I said, this is, when you prevent, I used to write reports all the time saying, all these requests about no contact orders. Almost all no contact orders are bad. Because what happens is the kid just gets to hate the father more, or the mother. Because they get, people sway them. And they start thinking, wow, it must be bad, I can't even see him. And these no contact orders, for the most part, they're a disaster. So, anyway, I did my report, said my piece, which was, we got to try something here. We should do it. The court then ordered me, after my 730 went in, the court ordered me, because they ordered the mother to have visits, she wouldn't bring them, she wouldn't bring the child to the visits. The court ordered the CSW to go to the kid's school and pull her out of school and then have a visit with dad. The mother would know the day that's going to happen, she'd keep her home from school so the worker couldn't get her. She just wasn't going to allow it. So what happens is, the court asks me to have a visit. And so I did it at a DCFS office because she had been there. And the court ordered the mother could not be in this building at the same time. So she did finally bring the child there, but she wasn't in the building. As soon as I was sitting with the father, it was like a half window, and as soon as she walked in the building, she saw me. She had seen me once. I never interviewed her, but the mother brought her with her the first time I saw the mother. And I just said hi to her, because I wasn't supposed to evaluate her. She saw me, and she saw her dad, and she started getting hysterical. And the workers couldn't get her, and they were saying, "No, come on, you have to go." And I said, "This is crazy. We can't do this." And so I told the worker, take her to another room. Just take her down the hall. Take her in there, and I had the worker go with her. And I says, tell her I'm going to come down in a few minutes, and I'll come and talk to her. And so I did. They took her in, they got her in a room. I came in, and I had also told the worker, and then after I talked to her for a few minutes, I'm going to give you a nod. And then we had the father outside on the other side. There was a two-door entrance. And when I give you the nod, have the father come in. And so I talked to her, and I told her, basically what I said to her is, listen, I've seen your father and your mother. I talked to both of them for hours. I talked to them about you and this whole situation. I've been told you used to have a good relationship with your father, and now you don't want to see him at all. I would like you to see him. And she wasn't saying much. She wasn't being too resistant. So I nodded to the worker, and now I told the father ahead of time, you walk in the door, you sit down, you do not try to touch her, hug her, kiss her, or anything. Just be nice, say hi. And he came in, and she's sitting there, and there was 4 of us there, sitting around a little table. And we're there, and nothing's happening, and he's trying to talk to her. Hi, how's school going? He's trying to be nice. And she's, you know how kids can get, and she didn't want to do it. And so finally I decided, oh, the father brought some Skittles, and he poured them out in the middle of the table. He says, here, have some Skittles, you used to like them. And she didn't want to take them. And so we're sitting there, and I'm just thinking, this isn't going to work. So I took a Skittle at each one of us, for 4 of us. And I sat there, and I shot the Skittle into the middle of the pile and scattered them. That kid cracked up. She just cracked up and started shooting Skittles at a father, at me, at the worker, and then the worker and I kind of backed off, and it was just the 2 of them. And at the end of doing that, she got up and gave her dad a high five. And she had a good time. And so the court said, continue with these visits. And I had ordered, as I have in many cases, that there be some, there used to be a person on the panel who would help with that reunification kind of issue. And they did it for about a month or 2. But it was, the mother was still resisting the visits terribly and not bringing the kid. And so they were still having trouble. And I'm telling you this for a reason. About a month and a half after the case, I got a call from the father's attorney. It was around 8:30 at night. And she told me that the mother just killed herself and this little girl. And that hits you. And I got to say this. We're out of time. I have to ask myself, I was very forceful in my report about, we got to do something about this case. This is ridiculous. This woman's out of control, basically. I didn't use those words like that, but you know what I'm saying. And I have to say that I have reflected that maybe there are some cases where I shouldn't do that because you push people too far. I'm going to be totally honest with you. 5 years before that case, I had a similar case. And very similar situation. Of course, sex abuse, alleging the father did it. I saw them all. I had the kids visit. And they were hiding. They didn't want to see him. He was a very nice man. He was passive. And he tried to make them go, but they didn't want to do it. Anyway, I ended up making the same recommendation. And about 6 to 8 months later, I was watching the news, and I saw the 2 kids. And I recognized the boy right away. He was 8, and the girl was 5 when I saw him. And I went, oh my God, I know that kid. And so I went, and I looked at the name, and I looked at the file. That mother killed both of his kids. And it was the same situation. I said, this is crazy. We got to do something. These people are just being denied access, etc. But now, you know, I'm wondering, what is the right thing to do? I still think you have to try. But maybe, and it isn't just on me, it's the people doing the efforts, it's DCFS, it's the therapist. When do you push and when don't you? It's the court too. When do they order get real tough and when do they ease up? It's not just me. But these are tough cases. And I had to start thinking, wow, maybe I'm not doing the right thing with some of these kids. You have to make a judgment. So, I got to end. And here's the ending. Perspective. I know that this place is called, disparagingly, kitty court in certain legal circles. Like, oh, you don't do law, you do social work. You know, you're not really, the judges just do what they want. I know how people think. I've been around a lot of forensic blocks. The jail, psych hospitals, I've been around a lot of places. I'm telling you, this is a hard, tough place to work. And you're doing it. And so I admire you for doing it. It's tough work. And these are hard cases. There's no easy answers to this stuff. and you have to reflect on what you're doing. So I have to get out of here, so my last 1:15. I have a little short prayer for you. My understanding is it's a Native American prayer. But in the course of the recent presidential campaign, I read an article on Hillary where I saw the same little prayer, and it said, she said it was a Methodist prayer. So I don't know if it's Methodist or if it's Native American. But here's what I want to say. Do all the good you can, with all the means you can, in all the ways you can, for all the people you can, and do it for as long as you can. Thank you very much.